Hello, welcome back to my channel. I'm Lena, this is Lena's Bookshelf, and today we're going to talk about some light historical fiction. These are some recommendations that I think would be good if you want to maybe see if historical fiction is for you. Maybe it might give you a good idea if you like them or not. Some of these are thrillers, some of these are, literary fiction. All in all, pretty light. None of these are going to be Renaissance era, it's all going to be 1900s and above, still in an era where there are, automobiles and telephones and things like that. So the first recommendation I have is Keeping Lucy by T. Greenwood. And this one is based in the 1970s. And this is about a woman who gives birth to a daughter that has a disability. Her husband doesn't want her to try and raise this child because of her disability. He puts her in a residential treatment center. A couple years later, she goes to visit her child in the residential treatment center and learns that it's not a good place. They are neglecting and abusing the children and leaving the children in dirty diapers, and she has rashes and things like that. And so she realizes, I can't leave my child here. So she basically steals her child from this school for children with disabilities and goes on the run with her. So I think this is good because this is in an era of time that there's cars, there's telephones and things like that. So it's a little bit closer to the life we live now. So, not horse and buggy and candles for light and things like that. There's electricity and things like that. This is really good if you kind of wanted to get into historical fiction that has a little bit more of a thrilling aspect. This isn't a thriller by any means, but you definitely are following this woman as she's on the run with her child, trying to keep her child out of this neglectful home that she's been placed in. The next recommendation I have for you is The Four Winds by Kristen Hanna. This book is set in the 1920s and it's about the Dust Bowl. So you're following this woman and her children in California during the Great Depression as they're, trying to pick cotton for money and they're just living in poverty. This is probably the most heavy historical fiction of this bunch, but it's definitely a good read. Like I said, I'm not a huge historical fiction reader, but I did give this 4 stars. Kind of delve even a little bit deeper into that historical fiction realm. Next we have All the Ugly and Wonderful Things by Bryn Greenwood, and this book is set in the 60s and 70s. You're following Wavy, and she doesn't have such a great home life, kind of following her life as she is growing up and falling in love with this older man. But nothing sexual happens until she's of age. So there's no like underage consent is not really a factor here. So it's kind of this age gap romance. The next book I have is Water for Elephants by Sarah Gruen, and this book is based in the 1930s, and it is about somebody who runs away to join the circus. So this man runs away to join the circus and he becomes a vet for this traveling circus. It's, it's gritty and there's romance, and this has been made into a movie too. So this is, I read this book years ago and I've kept it on my shelf. I've reread it even. There is a little bit of abuse towards elephants in this at one point, so definitely trigger warnings for animal abuse. But overall, it's a really good book. A lot of it is set on the train or at the circus. So it's kind of, one of those nostalgic books, kind of reminds me of being at the circus when I was little. Okay, and then the last 2 books that I have to recommend to you are books that have dual timelines. So they have a timeline of a historical fiction story, but then they also have a modern day timeline. So the first one that I have is The Dream Daughter by Diane Chamberlain, and this one is about a woman in the 70s who is pregnant, and she learns that her daughter has a heart defect, and in the 1970s her child wouldn't make it, and somebody in her life tells her, I'm actually from the future and I can transport you forward in time to the 2000s in order to get the fetal surgery that your baby needs. So you're following the 1970s timeline, and you're also following this woman from 1970 in the 2000s, similar to Keeping Lucy, in that we are following a mother who is basically going to whatever ends possible, whatever means possible to keep her daughter safe. And then the last book I have to recommend to you is The Storyteller by Jodi Picoult. So this is one of my favorite Jodi Picoults that I read, and I will at some point have a Jodi Picoult ranking video, but she has a lot of books, and so going through my thoughts and ranking them is taking a little bit of time, so stay tuned for that video. But basically you're following this woman who's a baker, and she befriends this gentleman that starts telling her these stories, and he starts telling her these stories about the Holocaust era. So basically you're following, and it's set in modern day, but then you're also following these different timelines of this different story, and it's really cool because you can easily keep track of it because there's different fonts for the different timelines. So it's a different font when you're kind of reading the story from the Holocaust, and then there's a different font when you're reading from Sage's timeline in the present. And so basically just following Sage as she listens to this older man kind of confess some of his secrets to her of things that happened in the Holocaust. So it's really good. I highly recommend it. All right, so those are all the recommendations I have for some very light historical fiction. Quick way to kind of get your toes in the water, so to say, with historical fiction. So if you read any of these and you enjoyed them, let me know. If you have other recommendations for some light historical fiction that might be good for somebody just getting into that genre, definitely let me know. I could maybe do a part 2 of this video. Please hit that subscribe button. It really helps out my channel. I'll link some of my other videos below and in the cards and things like that. And I'll see you next time. Bye.